Hello biology class. This is a video in a series of 2 or 3 videos all about biological evolution. In this short video, I hope to exercise some of your preconceived notions of evolution because the word is familiar to you. You've heard about it before, and you may have heard things like evolution is just a theory, and we'll talk about that. Evolution is a theory, but we'll talk about really what a theory means, and then in some of the other evolution videos, I hope to prove to you that there's a lot of scientific evidence for evolution. But this is just an introductory video for evolution. By the end of the video, I hope that you have a working definition for what biological evolution is. So here you can see a great photograph of a fossil species. This is a trilobite. This species of arthropod is no longer living on Earth. And the curious thing about evolution is that as some species adapt and evolve and survive, some don't. Some go extinct. But it's the fossils that we have that lead us to conclude that over long periods of time there were creatures that had certain kinds of forms and features, and there are creatures that we have now that have different forms and features. And that's what leads us to conclude that things must have evolved over time. So let's talk about some of the things that you may associate with evolution. For example, you may think that evolution is how all living things on Earth were created. Maybe you heard that somewhere. I would agree somewhat with that statement. We don't know if this is exactly how all of the species on Earth got here, but we do have some evidence that suggests that that is probably how it all happened. There are so many different kinds of things on Earth that the process of evolution is likely to have led to the creation of all of those things over time. We have another statement here. Evolution is just a theory. Again, you may have seen this before or heard this, or maybe somebody told you that evolution is just a theory. I would agree with this statement. It is a theory, but to put the word just in there has a connotation that leads you to believe that it's like a small theory, or it's just a theory, like there isn't much evidence for it. And so while I would agree that evolution is indeed a theory, we haven't exactly proven it yet, but to say it's just a theory, I don't really like how that's phrased. So hopefully in our evolution videos I can prove to you that it isn't just a theory, but that it is a theory, and it's a pretty good one. You may have heard that humans evolved from apes. Well, again, I would somewhat agree with this statement, but it's not complete. It doesn't have all the pieces there. Did humans evolve from apes? Well, not exactly. The scientific evidence suggests that humans and apes evolved together, and that we share some past in evolutionary history, but evolving directly from them, we're not quite sure that that's exactly how it worked. So, we're left with this question: what is evolution? Here we have some other pictures of some creatures that you know of. We have a beetle, a lobster, and an armadillo. And I chose these because they look somewhat like the larger photograph there of the trilobite over here on the left-hand side. The beetle has that hard exoskeleton with a pattern that looks like the trilobite. The lobster, again, has that hard exoskeleton with that segmentation that, again, looks like the trilobite. And then, of course, we have the armadillo. It's a mammal. It is not an insect or a crustacean, but here we have a mammal that has characteristics that look like this ancient creature, the trilobite. And so one of the key parts about evolution is that some of those things that we see in the past show up in the future, which means they never really went away to begin with. They're just present in different kinds of creatures. And so we have species that existed previously evolving into species that we have now. Here you can see a sort of a brief depiction of some bones of fossilized horses or horse-like creatures, and then at the top here you can see that these are the most recent modern-day horses. You can see the skull and the leg bones and then the overall skeleton there, and you can see that the bottom three here, 1, 2, 3, these two species on the bottom don't exist anymore. These are fossilized horse-like creatures, but you can see that over time they change. They look similar from one sort of fossilized creature to the next, and they're put here in order of their occurrence from the late Eocene to the middle Miocene to the late Miocene. Those are just periods in ancient time. So we see these things changing over time, and so one kind of creature turning into another, or transforming into another. But we're talking over millions and millions of years, maybe even billions of years when it comes to some of the most ancient types of organisms that we have evidence of. Here's another example of sort of evolution in action, but this time in fish. So we have on this diagram over here on the left-hand side, again in order in which they occur in the layers of rock that we find the fossils in, we have old fish. Then we have fish that start to grow limbs, or fish that have limbs. And then we have something like Ichthyostega, which is a creature that lived on land, but it looks like a fish a little bit, but it has limbs that allow it to walk on land. And then, of course, if we go backwards in time, we can kind of see the reverse of that transformation in progress. This is a picture on the right-hand side here. This is a picture of the actual Tiktaalik skeleton that was found in North America. And this is, above that, is sort of an artist's rendition, a sculptor's rendition of what that creature might have looked like. And what's interesting is that we see the transition in this creature. This one is the middle one over here, where the species were transitioning from the water-based life to a land-based life, and this creature looks like something that would live in shallow water that would periodically find its way onto land. So again, we have this transformation over time. As we find more and more fossils of more and more ancient creatures, we can put evolution together sort of like a puzzle. And so finally, here we are, sort of at the end of our video. We want to define evolution. So the first thing is that evolution is the gradual change in organisms over time. And again, I showed you that with the horses or the fish, where they make small changes over time, whether it's the horse getting larger, which is what you see if you look at that figure again, or whether it's the fish-like creatures adapting and developing limbs that allow them to live in shallow water, and have other adaptations that allow them to live on land. So gradual changes over time. These are not huge changes that happen in short periods of time. These are gradual changes over extremely long periods of time. And that leads us to our two bolted points here, is that small gradual changes lead to larger changes. So one of the biggest questions in evolution is, how do you go from one species to a whole other species? And the answer to that is, it takes time and it takes small changes. But again, those small changes can accumulate over time into drastically different creatures, like from the trilobite to the beetle, or the trilobite to the lobster. Those organisms are related evolutionarily, but it took a long time for the trilobite features to evolve over time into some of the species we see today, like the lobster or the armadillo or the beetle. And our last point here is that evolution creates new species. We have millions and millions of species here on Earth now, and it's because of the species that existed before them that we have the ones that we have now. And it's the traits and characteristics of those ancient creatures that we no longer have that gave rise to the characteristics in the creatures that we see now. So again, evolution is a gradual change in organisms over time. It's those small gradual changes that account for the large changes that we see over that time frame, and evolution is the force that creates new species. So that's our definition of biological evolution, but I want to show you a little bit more before we leave our video. Here you can see more of these gradual changes. This picture up here is an artist's rendition of what some of our fossilized creatures may have looked like as they transitioned from over here on the left-hand side, which is a reptile-type creature that has small feathers, to other reptile/bird type creatures that have larger feathers and then smaller legs and then smaller tail feathers, to what a modern-day bird looks like with a large tail of feathers, nice large feathers on the wings, and of course these creatures actually fly, whereas the other creatures we hypothesized actually didn't fly. Down here in the lower left is Archaeopteryx, one of the most pivotal and important fossils that have been found that shows a connection between dinosaurs and birds. We now think that a lot of the birds we have now evolved from a subset of dinosaurs that existed a long time ago. This middle diagram here shows you a more detailed look at some of those very important characteristics that are very bird-like, yet are found in what we can only classify as a small dinosaur. And then over here on the right-hand side, on the lower right-hand side, you can see the relationship that we think we have between sort of dinosaurs with long necks that may have walked or ran on 2 feet, to dinosaurs that may have done the same thing but now have feathers, to something like Archaeopteryx, which may have actually jumped from trees or ledges and may have actually glided. Maybe it didn't flap its wings and fly, but it certainly glided and flew a little bit. And of course, that's what we think led to further adaptations to evolve into birds. So birds are actually reptiles, and birds, we think, are actually dinosaurs. So this is just another very interesting example that comes out of the theory of evolution. So again, here's our evolution definition. Make sure you write it down in your notes, and I hope you join me for video number 2 in our evolution series.